We're not even 2 weeks from the murder of Charlie Kirk, again, in front of his family. And the left has already, I should say, left-aligned individuals have already shot up an ABC station and threatened death and terror against others. So it is fairly obvious. They are proud of what they do. They are celebrating what they do, and they are continuing to do it. The only response that makes sense, of course, is federal law enforcement. Donald Trump's FBI arrested the guy who shot up the ABC Sacramento station. He needs to use the full force of federal law enforcement to go after every single one of these leftists and liberals who are sending death threats, and they must go to prison.
Yeah.
The left will respond by saying this proves Trump's a fascist, and they will escalate their already terror campaigns. I don't see an off-ramp being possible. And I will stress this again, because I wish this were not the case. I would very much rather put on the WPT poker tournaments, watch some pros, dish out some chips while I order Papa John's stuffed crust pizza. Shout out Doe Toley, man. I love those videos where he's like, I'm going to put chicken nuggets in the crust of my pizza. That is paradise. But we can't have that, because a man who was left aligned murdered Charlie Kirk. Liberals, and I don't mean leftists, liberals celebrated this, lied about the shooter, defended it. When we got mad and said that is not okay, Disney said we're going to take this guy off the air because he's refusing to apologize. Sinclair said we'll put up a tribute for Charlie Kirk, a man who was murdered, who did nothing wrong. And within a day, the death threats and terror threats against Sinclair were so great, they pulled the memorial. The left is not going to stop.
No. I feel like I've been thinking a lot about what we were talking about last week. You described a series of events that would look like a civil war, pockets of violence throughout the country. And I just can't get out of my head that we are in that already.
That's
what bro. 2020 was that.
The Nashua shooting, the guy yelled, "The children are safe, free Palestine," and then shot and killed somebody and shot a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
A guy drove up to an ABC affiliate, unloaded on it, not even a week after Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And so what people need to understand is, there's a civil strife period, and boy, we've been in that for a long time. Look at the George Floyd riots. That is civil strife. It doesn't always lead to civil war. I'm not saying we're in a civil war now, but what you will see, man, because I've been in countries under revolution. I've not been in actual war, but I was in Ukraine at the start of their civil war, which, Russia invading is a whole other thing. I was in Egypt during the second revolution, and I'm sitting in the hotel. I go to the lobby, and there's people eating that beef bacon, because you can't eat pork in Egypt. So they're eating normal food. Literally, it's terrifying. I'm in the lobby, and there's a guy typing on his computer while there are reports that the Egyptian military is arresting journalists. Outside the window, and these are big 20-foot tall or 15-tall windows, people are shooting each other. They're using shotguns, so we don't, if it was bullets like 9mm, we'd be on the ground. Mm-hmm. But they have these makeshift breech-loading shotguns, handguns, that they put a shell in and then go boosh. And we're sitting there, and I look at this guy, I'm like, aren't you worried about it? He's like, nah, they're not going to shoot at us. And then I was like, but the Egyptian military is now arresting journalists. He's like, pro-Muslim ones.
Jeez.
In Egypt, outside of the hotel, while people are doing this, there's a McDonald's where a guy was watching soccer. We drove to Heliopolis, went to the mall. I had kebab. Bought a cell phone to use for data transmission. And people carry on their lives as if nothing happens. And they're standing in the mall watching the news reports about the shootings, the violence, and the insanity. Because life goes on. There's videos out of Syria where during the Civil War, people are walking down the street with grocery bags and the buildings are all rubble. So it is terrifying that we are now in a country where, I wake up, I grab breakfast, I come into work, turn the news on, and it's shooting, bomb threats. Bomb threat at RFK Jr.'s house. Police were dispatched over a bomb threat. Mm-hmm. ABC affiliates shot up. TV stations in panic.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Like 2020, people are home. There's nurses twerking with body bags on TikTok. There's mayors handing out free cheeseburgers for vaccines. There's Chaz and Chop, children being shot, innocent people being shot, David Dorn shot in the head, fires everywhere. It feels like that was the beginning of a sustained political violence. Maybe it was easy for some people to forget when we went back to normal, but it never really went back to normal because it feels like reality is just hanging on by a thread.
Well, and even outside of that, the United States, like the threshold Americans have for violence is actually quite high. For the longest time we've dealt with, I mean, you see headline after headline out of Chicago, dozens killed over the weekend, and everyone's like, yeah, well, that's Chicago. Like, our threshold for violence. I mean, you go to Netflix, the top shows are like murder mysteries and, the behind the scenes of terrorist attacks. So we just live in a very violent society, and everyone's just kind of used to it. So it's like only natural that the political theater would go kinetic because everything else in American life's gone kinetic.
The weird thing about that, you're right, there is a lot of violence in the United States, but it's in such pockets that like most people don't actually experience it. It's like most people that are in the burbs, or even people that live in, if you don't live around a certain neighborhood in a handful of cities, you're likely to not ever experience the kind of violence that you see in urban areas in the US. For the most part, it doesn't even touch people, but you're right, it does desensitize Americans. Yeah. So that way it's like you hear this stuff, and it becomes, well, that's just the way that it is.
Well, yeah, people are desensitized because if you live in a, like Memphis and you're in a suburb, the entire city is off limits. And it's like, well, why is that? Well, because it's exceptionally violent. And we're just used to that. We just accept that, even though we're in the wealthiest, most powerful country in human history. And violence, mass violence is just sort of like, it's not accepted, it's just, yeah, that's just part of life. That's part of American life.
But then do you, something about the murder of Irina, I don't know how to pronounce her last name. Zarutska and Charlie Kirk, like that, I was talking earlier about this, that feels like it was the first mass trauma event for Gen Z. Like nobody remembers the Twin Towers falling, right. But that, like, sure, fine. We played Call of Duty when we were growing up, and maybe we don't like understand violence because of that. That feels like the first time I've ever been sensitized to, not desensitized, but sensitized to the reality of political violence in the U.S. Like, I think that there's more people now, or at least Zoomers, that feel as though there is like imminent threat of violence all of the time. And a lot of people in tech say something to the effect of like, well, it's actually just like Chinese bots or Russian bots sowing division. I don't think that there is as large a majority of like common sense, reasonable people in the middle that don't believe in violence. I think it's way more people on both sides, or at least on the left for sure, that like are very willing to commit violence, and people on the right now that are very aware of the threat of political violence.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of been the left has always been more comfortable with violence, and they look at it's my opinion. They look at violence like a dial, and
the right looks at it like a switch.
Yeah, they look at it like a switch. So the right doesn't want to be violent. They don't think that violence is useful. They think that violence only means more violence. And so they do everything they can to avoid being violent. Whereas the left has no problem going out and rioting. And you saw it in 2016 when Donald Trump was elected. Everyone, there was a bunch of riots all over the place. They ripped up DC. You saw it obviously in 2020 with the Summer of Love and whatever and what have you. And you see it regularly. Everyone knows that had a right-leaning person killed a prominent person on the left, there would have been riots. There would have been absolute chaos in a lot of places in the U.S. And this is completely obvious to everybody.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.